So I'm going to the Blackboard page. Good morning, everyone, again. I'm going in to explain you all the term paper. So the most important thing that I like about term paper is it gives you a chance to write. And it is also an inclusive process because some people may not be good at quiz taking or exams. So writing could help to help to improve the grades, and also writing is an important exercise. So number one, it's 15% towards your grade. It gives you to look at what is going on in the society. There, it's generally a current topics. They're current topics, and so I would like to go over the guidelines of the term paper. So if you click on the folder, it opens a list of things. On the top, you have term paper guidelines and a sample term paper. Your term paper is due on January 20th, and I'll just edit something. It's due by 11:59 p.m. Remember that this is a winter session, and I would have to submit your grade as soon as possible once the final exam is done. So it's very important that you don't forget this deadline, because I need to read. There are about 35 students in the class, so I'll have to read 35 term papers. So I need time to read, and then so keeping everything in mind, I have the January 20th is good for me and should be good for you. So let's look at the guidelines. So this is just one-page guidelines, very straightforward. You have to choose one of the three topics. There are three topics listed here. You choose only one. So what are those topics? Number one, differences and similarities between the genes and proteins of HIV and COVID-19 viruses. Second is role of artificial intelligence in contact tracing during pandemic. Impact of COVID-19 pandemic on education, right? So these three topics, which covers not only science or biology, it also covers education. So all three topics have different flavor, and you can choose one of them, right? And specific guidelines are that your term paper should have abstract, conclusion, and of course, when you are writing this term paper, you are going to consult various articles, research articles, that you should reference what you are consulting, as to write your term paper. That's one of the most important part. That's a sort of a peer acknowledgement that you read people's research or people's opinions or people experiences, and then it's helping you to write. So you must acknowledge people from whom you are taking notes from, and so you must reference them in the end of your term paper. So you start with abstract. Abstract is very concise description of what you are writing, so that when I am about to read your term paper, I read the abstract and I know what I'm going to read about. A good abstract, you're writing something to help the readers. You're not writing for yourself. Yes, you're writing in a way, you're writing for yourself, but you're writing actually for audience, right? And your audience is, in this situation, me. So if I get an idea that your abstract is concise, to the point, and you have covered everything that is supposed to be in a term paper. And then once you write, you conclude, right? Conclusion and what's the future is very important aspect of writing. That's your vision. It should come from you. It should not come from somebody else. So let's say, for example, you are consulting 5 papers or 2 papers. Two papers could be very different from each other, right? But you have that ability to read both the paper. So your conclusions will be very different than either of the paper. So it should have you. When you're writing science is based upon facts. So you cannot change, right? So only thing you can do is put things in your words. But as far as conclusion is concerned, it should come from you, and you should also reflect future perspective. So summary and abstract, half page. Introduction, you introduce the topic, right? And so that's 1 to 2 pages, 1.5 pages. And then the main content, right? So for example, if you chose the topic number 1, differences and similarities between proteins of HIV and COVID-19. So in the introduction, you can write what are these viruses, what they do, right? And what is their brief life cycle. You can add a picture to help your description. Illustration or a figure is to help the reader as well as help the writer to advance the writing. It should not be disconnected. It should, just like, in movies, you have songs. So these songs, they help to advance the story of the movie. This is an example. So these figures, whether you should have only one figure, because it's a very short term paper, 5 pages. So one figure is enough, and that figure should help you to write your story. So, and then the main content is where you will describe various genes of HIV and various genes of COVID-19, and then various proteins. And these genes and proteins, viruses use to capture human immune system. That's how they survive and succeed in our body. So you should mention that. And then you conclude based upon what you are writing. So it should be packaged well. So references is not part of 5 pages. It is addition to the 5 pages, right? And generally, generally, if you are submitting to federal agencies, they would require either Times Roman 12 font or Arial 11 font with margin of 0.75. Some requires with a margin of 0.5. So make sure you cover this aspect. So guidelines are very important. Some students, they just write half a page and just move on to the next page. So it's very clear, right? What was given in the guidelines. So it should be, double space, 12 font, 0.75 margin. All these are small things, but contribute towards your point, towards your, So I covered this term paper. Now let me go. Some students, they ask me that how to add the references. So here you can choose any style from this. So this is bunch of various styles, which is given by American Medical Association citation style. You can choose any style that you want. I'm pretty flexible about that. I'm my more is my emphasis is more that whosoever journals, magazine, newspaper, whomever you are covering to write your paper, your term paper, you must add them as a citation. This is a way of acknowledgement, right? So that's there. You can choose any option from here. The third thing I have is a sample term paper. Now, this is a very concisely written term paper. This is, I just add this as an example for you. So you can see the student has, utilized all the space, and it's about stem cell technology. Right? So controversy. So see how this student has, to help me read, has, created paragraphs, subtitles, right? If the subtitles were not there, then, it's just, it doesn't look good. 5 papers, you need to make reading easy, right? So structure your term paper so that it becomes convenient for the readers. Even you think that you're changing paragraph, but you're starting a new topic, it's good idea to put a subtopic, and you can analyze, write something from both ends. So you see, conclusion is here. So it's a very nicely written term paper. This is a citation here. So do you have any questions regarding term paper? And let's just last thing here itself, you can, so after you are done, you can use this for submitting the term paper. So this is a folder in the content area, second folder, and then it's pretty straightforward. It's not complex. Yeah, somebody in the chat box. Yes, you can have a title page. You may not have a title page also. Like your title, you can start from a title page. So I'm pretty flexible. But you just, you are using one page to write the title. I wouldn't count that as one page. You can have the title and your abstract on the same page.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do the sources have to be peer-reviewed?
It's preferred to be peer-reviewed because peer review gives credibility, right? So let's say I write something, and these days there are a lot of internet sites or even journals that can take it, right? But if I write something and it has been reviewed by peers, right, it increases the credibility of citation as well as that publication, because it has been reviewed by 2 or 3 different people. And when people read, they give comments. And then one has to improve on the basis of that comments. So yes, peer review is always advisable. That's a good question.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Yes, welcome. Yes, somebody is raising hand. I'm not able to figure out who has raised the hand. So please, yeah, Miss Stacy Savage, you have raised a hand. Please go ahead, ask your question.
Morning. I just wanted to a reminder, how many pages for a term paper again?
5 pages. It's written there on the guidelines. 5 pages to January 20th by 11:59 p.m.
Sorry, say that again?
5 pages, and it's due January 20th by 11:59 p.m.
Okay, thank
Okay. So what I will do right now is to just okay. So let's I was just thinking whether I should stop this recording and make a separate folder for, but I really don't know how to do that. So I will continue teaching. So can everyone see the slides?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, thank you. So this is chapter number 1, which talks about biomolecules and energy. So why they have bridged this diverse topic into one, biomolecules and energy? It's because so first of all, let's define what is biomolecules. So biomolecules are those special molecules. So there are plenty of molecules on this planet or on this universe, right? Recently, you must have heard that there was an experiment in the space where a satellite was supposed to hit a meteor in the space and then collect the dust from those meteors, those you can say, and then they would go into analysis that those dust, and so what are those? Those are actually chemicals, right? And it is possible that when they do bring that dust to Earth, and the NASA analyzes that dust, and they could come up with new elements which is present in the space, and especially these space elements. So, but biomolecules refers to those molecules that support life. And I mentioned to you yesterday that there is diversity in the living organisms. And you can appreciate a pattern across these living organisms, but at the same time, you cannot have one hat for all the living organisms. So what do I mean by that? So you can see a pattern that DNA is a genetic material in most of the living organisms, right? But on the other hand, these living organisms could be unicellular, right? It could be multicellular. It could be, let's say, plants, and it could be animal kingdom. So while there is a pattern, that DNA is the genetic material in most of these organisms, Remember, I'm using the word most. I'm not saying all. So most of the organisms would have DNA as genetic material, but these could be a various diverse group of organisms, from bacteria to human beings, from algae to an eucalyptus tree, very tall. So now what I want you to appreciate is that when something is similar, it's easy to recognize a pattern. But if something is not similar, that dissimilarity, that differences is also a pattern. So just try to open your have an open thinking that patterns could be similarity, patterns could be noted in dissimilarity also, and this will help you to understand biomolecules. So biomolecules are molecules that support life, and one of the molecule I mentioned to you is DNA. Now, this chapter also tries to put in energy.
It's hot in here.
So, what is energy, right? Energy is that source, right? Energy is that source that helps you to perform, right? So, in context of biology, energy is the molecule for energy is ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. Right? Now, in context of driving the life, a cell needs energy, and that energy is provided by ATP. Now, in context of physical world, for example, let's say subway. Subway runs on electricity, or let's say battery, subway trains. So that energy could be coming from nuclear or from thermal or from hydroelectricity. You don't know. So there are various forms of energy. Energy serves as a source to perform the work. In context of humans or living organisms, the energy is ATP, is manufacturing of ATP. Now, and where this ATP, for example, your morning breakfast, your morning coffee, tea, whatever you take, right? It helps you to move forward in the day, or even drink a cup of water. So this energy that helps you to start your work, essentially it comes from food, right? And what we eat is actually very, very complex, right? So let's say you're eating salad, you're eating vegetables. Those are plant products. This is very, to convert those plant products or take fiber into energy, it is a process. And that process is called as metabolism. So metabolism helps to generate energy. And that energy that is generated is ATP. Now, this ATP is generated in a special organelle called as mitochondria inside the cell. Right? So now, living organism across unicellular plants, animals, bacteria, humans, then they work on the basis of ATP, most of them. So this is a very common pattern. So where does this ATP comes from? It comes from biomolecules, right? So, I'm sorry, it comes from biomolecules. So this chapter wants to teach you about biomolecules and energy. Now, I mentioned to you that you should appreciate a pattern in these biomolecules. So what is the pattern? The pattern here is that these biomolecules are essentially macromolecules. Are essentially macromolecules. Macro means big, and molecules means they're made up of large number of molecules. The pattern emerges because these macromolecules are made up of similar molecules. And these molecules are made up of atoms. Right? And these atoms are made up of, or these atoms represents a specific element. Right? So where do you find these elements, right? So if you look around, your neighborhood, if you're traveling on a train, and you see so many things on this, planet Earth. Or let's say you're flying on a plane and you're looking down, looking down on at the ground, you'll see so much vast variety of land. So now there are some things which are over the land, some things inside the land. So chemists have discovered various elements which are present in this planet, on this planet. And they will continue to discover more elements on this planet or in this space as the technology develops. So as the detection ability develops, so they are doing experiments on Mars. They're trying to figure out that there's high possibility that Mars had living organisms because they find sign of rocks. Finding rocks is a sign of water or hydration. So they're doing all those kinds of experiments to see what Mars is actually composed of. And if you see the surface of the planet Mars, you will find it's very reddish in color. Or there are some planets which are very reddish in color. That's because of excess of iron there. So, and iron can go various chemical processes. So anyway, I don't want to get into the chemistry. What I want to come back to you on this chapter is biomolecules. These biomolecules are made up of macromolecules. Macromolecules are essentially a collection of molecules, but these are chemicals, big chemical molecules. And the building block is molecules. A molecule is formed from one or two atoms, and these atoms, they represent a particular element. And scientists have discovered, and they continue to discover a huge amount of elements, and they'll continue to do so. So these elements have been arranged in a form of a table, and that table is called as periodic table. So this table is referred as periodic table. Right? So on this periodic table, you can see these elements are organized. And there, again, when you see the organization, you will see a pattern, right? So I don't want to get into details of this table. I just want to highlight those elements which are very important from biological perspective, especially the elements that make up biomolecules. So if you look on the left-hand side and look on the right-hand side, right? On the left-hand side of the corner, top corner, you'll see an element with an alphabet H. So each element is represented by one or two alphabets. For example, H is for hydrogen. Li is for lithium. So each one of them corresponds to an element, a different element. Now, if you look at the table, so a table typically has columns and left to right rows. So the beauty of this table is that all the elements in one column, they have similar physical and chemical properties. So if you see here, you will see a pattern again. If 1, 3rd, 11, 19, 37, 55. I don't want to go into the details, but you will see they are odd numbers, even and odd numbers, right? So let's focus on hydrogen. Hydrogen is the simplest element on this planet. But it is simplest, but it is very important. Can anyone say why hydrogen is important? Just from your daily real life, why is hydrogen important? Hydrogen is important because 70% of this planet or our cells, they contain water. And one of the most important content of water is hydrogen. So what is the chemical formula for water? H2O. 2 atoms of hydrogen, when they form chemical bonding with oxygen, it forms water. Without water, it was not possible to have life on this planet, right? So if you look, water is made up of 2 atoms of hydrogen that chemical bonds with oxygen. So while water is on group 1, oxygen is present here on the right-hand side, right? So, so if you look at column 16, right, the top atom is oxygen. And this hydrogen and oxygen is not only a part of water, but also it is part of DNA, protein, carbohydrate, glucose, lipids. You name any molecule that is present inside our body, it contains, most of them contains hydrogen and oxygen. So now another important atom that is, or element that is present on this periodic table, and that's also part of biomolecule, is carbon. Carbon is part of almost all the biomolecules, be it carbohydrate, be it nucleic acid, be it proteins. So how many elements we talked about? Hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, right? Then other atoms or elements that are present in biomolecule is nitrogen and phosphorus. They are present on column number 15. So if the take-home message for this periodic table is that here in this table, the elements are arranged into columns and rows. Columns have similar physical and chemical properties. If you focus on rows, right? So let's take one row. Let's say row number 4. If you go from left to right, let's say K, right? K stands for potassium, right? Ca stands for calcium, right? So if you go from left to right in row 4, 4th row, you'll see that the increment is 1, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, and so on and so forth till 36. Whereas if you go across column, there is a gap, right? So, so anyway, so here there is increment, right, by 1. So all these elements which are present in this row, they are very different from each other. And as they go from left to right, their reactivity increases, meaning that let's say on the left-hand side is Na stands for sodium, and here on the right-hand side, chlorine. So Na is part of group 1, which is sodium. Chlorine is part of group or column 17. It's sodium. Sodium column 1, chlorine is part of group 7, column 17. Now this sodium and chlorine, they are so much far apart, but they form a very important molecule when they go into chemical reaction. So when sodium and chlorine, they enter into chemical reaction or chemical interaction, they form a molecule called as sodium chloride. And this sodium chloride is again one of the most important molecules inside our body. And in addition, we consume sodium chloride every day because sodium chloride is the common kitchen salt. And salt is very important for the physiology of our body. If there is less sodium or more sodium, it can cause various kinds of illness. Similarly, potassium, right? Potassium is potassium is below sodium. Sodium is Na, potassium is K. So even potassium, if you go to if you give blood for any biochemistry, they will look at sodium potassium levels because that communicates the functioning of kidney or blood levels, and they can predict various parts of health. So now let's focus on, so you see these numbers, like hydrogen has 1, lithium writes here 3, sodium 11, K potassium 19. What are these numbers? So let's take a look at what does it means. So just give me 1 second. I'm trying to switch slides. So I have switched to the PowerPoint slide. Now let's focus on this element called as B. B stands for boron. So if you focus on this red color square, so B stands for element boron. Where is boron present? B, it's present over here before carbon. Now here you see, so here in this, the periodic table that is present on the slide, PowerPoint slide that I provided to you, here it would say the alphabet representing each element, and it will give the name of that element. And on the top, you will find boron, it writes 5. This 5 is referred as atomic number. And the 10.8, which is also on the top, it refers to atomic mass. So any element for this class, you need to know that any element which is present on this periodic table has an atomic number and an atomic mass, right? So as I mentioned to you, if you go from left to right, there is increment of 1, and this increment of 1 also results in the reactivity. The elements on the left is less reactive, whereas element on the right is most reactive. That's why very important molecule in our body, for example, water, a bond is formed between hydrogen and oxygen, H2O. Sodium chloride, a bond is formed between sodium and chlorine, which is common salt, and it's also important ions within our body. Potassium, fluoride, so all these. So these difference in reactivity helps two different atoms to react. And when two atoms react, they form a molecule. Okay? They form a molecule. And if you look at one atom, here, for example, boron, which is represented by one single alphabet B, on top, there are two numbers. One is 5, the other is 10.8. 5 refers to atomic number, and 10 refers to atomic mass. So going from left to right, there is an increase in atomic number, there is increase in atomic mass. Right? So let's now go into a little bit more detail, what atomic number and atomic mass, and then that would be the end of chemistry in this chapter. Then we go into chemical interaction. So let's go to sometimes I also take help of Google Images because they also provide good slides and good information. So let's say here, look at the carbon, right? Carbon is represented by an alphabet C. 6 refers to atomic mass. 6 refers to atomic number. Atomic numbers refers to number of protons. And 12, which is on the top here, almost twice of 6, 12, it represents atomic mass. And atomic mass is protons plus neutrons. So let's look at another example. This is an element helium, right? This is below hydrogen on the periodic table. Any atom is composed of two parts. A core part called as nucleus, and around this nucleus there are revolving electrons. Now pay attention here. The nucleus is made up of two particles, protons and neutrons. Protons are positively charged particles. Neutrons are neutral, they don't have any charge. And the electrons that revolve around the nucleus has negative charge. Now look carefully here, and helium has an atomic number of 2. 2 atomic number means protons. So there are 2 protons here represented by positive signs. And there are 2 neutrons represented by purple color in a sphere. Atomic mass refers to protons plus neutrons. So in the case of helium, 2 is atomic number, which refers to number of protons. 4 is the total atomic mass that refers to protons plus neutrons. Same you would see in carbon. Atomic number, number of protons, and 12, atomic mass, proton plus neutrons. Protons are positively charged, neutrons are neutral charged. The electrons that revolve around the nucleus in case of helium, they are negatively charged, but their mass is very, very small. As compared to protons and neutrons, the mass of electrons. So you can ask me a question why a mass is something like total, but why we don't include electrons here. So electrons the weight, the contribution, the density of electrons are negligible, but electrons contribute towards charge. So if you see here, there are 2 protons which are positively charged. There are 2 neutrons which are neutral charged. So this was 2 electrons, negative charge, 2 protons in the nucleus, positive charge. They balance out each other. So the net charge on an atom is neutral. Okay, so so we are almost 1 hour into the class. I would like to take, give one 5 to 10 minutes break, and then we come back. So it's 10 o'clock. We come back at 10:10. All right. So for the sake of attendance, students who came late, can you, I just gave you permission to attend the class, but I haven't marked your attendance. It's very important. Could you tell me the students who came, who joined the class later, please? I mean, if you don't say anything, then I'll have to take attendance again, which is not good for my time. Sania Kelly, okay.
Oh, I'm not sure if you got my name, but this is Kayla McCollum.
Who?
Kayla McCollum.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Tian Henry.
T.N. Henry? Yeah, I have you. Yeah, I have.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
And Sania Kelly.
Who? Sania Kelly.
Sania Kelly.
Got you. Yeah.
Diamond Berry.
Diamond Berry, I got you when you did. Some students I see and I mark it, some students I cannot if I'm in the process of teaching. So since it is synchronous class, attendance is,
unlike me.
So it's 10:10 now. Let's go back where we stopped. So what I was mentioning to you is that I was mentioning to you about a molecule called as sodium chloride. Sodium chloride is a molecule that is made from two atoms. Now, there can be different types of molecules. For example, when I talk about sodium, which is represented by two alphabet Na, and chlorine, which is represented by Cl. So sometimes, you can ask me a question that why it is not represented by S, like hydrogen H or helium He, or potassium K, why it is not by single letter. So there are some, there's some elements which have common first alphabet. For example, sulfur. Sulfur is represented by S, so sodium is represented by Na. So these are conventional things that has been established in a long time back. So the two atoms here are sodium and chlorine. So they are two different, right? So they are heteromolecule, two different atoms. There are some molecules such as hydrogen gas, right? This is made up of two similar atoms, so they become similar. So for example, carbon dioxide, you always write element with big letters, right? So here it is, there are three atoms here. Out of these three atoms, there are two different types of atoms. So total number of atoms here is 3. Types of atoms here are 2. One is carbon, the other is oxygen. And they enter into chemical bonding, right, to form carbon dioxide that is exhaled. Similarly, oxygen, right? Oxygen is made up, oxygen gas that we inhale is made up of 2 atoms of oxygen, right? So there are different kinds of chemical arrangement, and 2 atoms, they enter into arrangement or called as interaction or chemical interaction is to gain stability, right? And that's the nature, chemical reaction, chemical interaction, but the goal is one, to enter into a chemical configuration of stability. So, so sodium chloride here, 2 different atoms, right? So let's go back into the go back to the PowerPoint slide. So this is referred as electronic configuration. This is referred, what is presented here is referred as electronic configuration. This is the electronic configuration of sodium, and this is the electronic configuration of chlorine atom. So at this stage, there are 2 independent atoms. Now, if you remember, I mentioned to you while I was describing periodic table that sodium is present on the left-hand side of the periodic table, whereas chlorine is present on the right-hand side. And the elements which are present on the right-hand side of the periodic table, they are more reactive, more stronger, more electronegativity, right? And elements which are present on the left, they are weak comparatively. So now pay attention. I don't want to go into the details of the chemistry, but I just want to focus you. I want you to focus on this electron. So this is the nucleus of sodium, around the nucleus of the sodium, there are revolving electrons. Now, if you see the outermost orbit of sodium, in the outermost orbit of sodium, there is only one electron here. Now, let's go to chlorine atom. If you look at chlorine atom, it also has central core nucleus, and around this core nucleus, there are orbits in which electrons are moving, right, revolving. If you look at the outermost electrons or the outermost orbit, you will see that the number of electrons in the outermost orbit is 7. So sodium has 1 electron, whereas chlorine has 7 electrons in the outermost orbit. Now, to become more stable, right, if sodium loses 1 electron to chlorine, then chlorine has 8 electrons. So when electron is, so what happens in nature is that sodium is a weak atom, chlorine is a strong atom. So sodium loses 1 electron to chlorine, and this leads to formation of chemical bond, and they are started to call as sodium chloride. But there's a process. When sodium loses an electron, right, the number of protons goes up. So when sodium, I repeat, when sodium loses an electron, the number of proton goes up. So there is an equilibrium between protons and electrons to make the atom neutral. When sodium loses 1 electron, the number of protons increases. Because of that, sodium becomes positive charge. So that's what is given here. Sodium is a neutral atom. When it loses an electron, it becomes positive charge. But it is losing electron to whom? It is losing electron to chlorine. So chlorine, when gains 1 electron, the number of electrons has increased now. So electrons carry negative charge. So the total charge on chlorine is negative. So sodium is positive, chlorine is negative. So they become opposite charges. One is positive, one is negative. And you know that opposite charge attracts each other. So there is a bonding between sodium ion and chlorine ion. When an atom loses an electron, or when an atom gains an electron, they no more remain neutral. The atom that loses an electron becomes positive. The atom that gains an electron, they becomes negative. So sodium becomes positive ion. It's no more a neutral atom. Chlorine that gains an electron becomes negative ion. So positive ion and negative ion, they attract each other. And because of these attraction, there is a formation of chemical bond called as ionic bond. So ionic bond is formed between 2 ions, positive and negative. Positive ions are formed by loss of electrons. Negative ions are formed by gain of electron. And this generates a energy for interaction. That energy is called as electrostatic forces. Any attraction based upon charge is referred as electrostatic interaction or forces. So that's how the compound sodium chloride is formed, and that is such an essential element of our cell, our tissue, functioning of an organ. If the level of sodium in the blood or in the kidney or is low, it could have a serious consequence. Similarly, potassium, it could give rise to heart attack or brain stroke. So these small elements like sodium, chlorine, or salt, is very, sometimes, sometimes if there is a sudden feeling of nausea or you start feeling giddiness, a little bit of putting a tinge of salt in the tip of your tongue, it helps. So similarly, if somebody is feeling weak, little bit sugar or consumption of juice or glucose, it also helps. So, so here there are two different molecules that enter into arrangement, and this bonding is called as ionic bonding because this happens post formation of positive and negative ions, which is formed by loss or gain of electrons. The second type of molecules that I mentioned to you before is formation of hydrogen bond. Okay? Or let's say the formation of to be more specific, when two hydrogen molecules they enter into a chemical reaction, they form a hydrogen gas. And this bonding is called as covalent bonding. The bonding between sodium and chlorine is called as ionic bonding. So ionic bonding is between ions. The covalent bonding is between two atoms. What's the difference between covalent bonding and ionic bonding? Ionic bonding is formed between two ions. Covalent bonding is formed between two atoms by sharing of electrons, while ionic bonding is by loss or gain, by formation of ions, interaction between ions. Covalent bonding is by sharing of electrons. And it depends, but if you compare two molecules, covalent bonding is more stable than ionic bonding. It is by sharing of electrons. So if you see most of the biomolecules, they have covalent bonding, but there are exceptions such as sodium chloride, potassium chloride, where we see an ionic bonding. And when we go into to study more details of DNA or RNA, you will see another kind of bonding called as hydrogen bonding. Now, one of the most interesting molecule on this planet is, to me, is water molecule, right? Why it is important and interesting? Because first of all, what you see in this water molecule, what you see here in this water molecule, you see here negative charge towards oxygen and positive charge towards hydrogen. I repeat, negativity towards oxygen and positivity towards hydrogen. But you see here it says delta negative. It says here delta positive. This reflects they're partially positive, not like totally negative, not totally positive. They're partial. So there are two different. So in a water molecule, as I mentioned to you, a water molecule is made up of two hydrogen atoms that is connected to oxygen atom, to one oxygen atom. Now, how are they connected? They are connected via covalent bond. So what makes water molecule interesting? That despite there are separation of charges like in an ionic bond, right? But still, it is a covalent molecule. The second interesting thing that makes water as a favorite solvent inside our body. So, we cook food in water, right? We don't cook food in anything else, right? Water is across the globe, water is a major, ingredient of making, various kinds of food, unless you are baking or roasting. That's different. So another important thing is that water is a favorite solvent. It can dissolve many different kinds of elements, atoms. For example, sugar can dissolve in water, salt can dissolve in water, right? So what makes water so special? So one of the component of water that makes it stable is it's a neutral pH. I don't want to go into detail, but it's a neutral compound, right? Water is a neutral compound. Had water been more acidic, more basic, it would not have been good for our physiology, but nature made water. And what I think that when planet Earth was being formed, or so it must be, hot ball of fire, and when the temperature was cooling down, when temperature cools down, there are emission of a lot of gases. So probably hydrogen and oxygen were coming out of that, cooling down, and then they enter into chemical reaction, and that led to the formation of water. And water is the first sign, to see, to promote life at a particular thing. Without water, it's difficult to have life. So water is 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen. It's a covalent bond, but it's polar. Why it is polar? Because there is separation of charge, negative and positive. And it's a neutral pH, it's a common solvent, and so on and so forth. So what is the most interesting thing about water? The most interesting thing water is that water, they can connect with each other. This connection in the water gives water the fluidity, right? What do I mean by fluidity? For example, let's say a tree, a long tree. How does water reaches from a root to the topmost shoot? It is because water has ability to stick to the vessels of the plants, and that vessels can generate a force that can drive water against the gravity. Now, when water moves so plants absorb water through the roots inside the soil, and they move against the gravity. When we drink water, it goes to, in our case, it goes in the direction of gravitational force. In plants, it is against. So the chemical structure of water plays a very important role in movement of water from root to the topmost shoot in plants. So why I say that? So let's go back to the whiteboard. So let's assume that, right? So I just draw figures which are not artistic, what I'm trying to draw. So let's consider that. So let's say that this is oxygen, which is partially negative, and then it is connected to 2 hydrogen atoms, right? And these hydrogen atoms, they are connected via covalent bond, and because of this, there is partial negativity on oxygen and there is partial positivity on hydrogen. Right? Now what happens that this oxygen, which is negative, it can form another bond with hydrogen of water. And this hydrogen can again form a different bond with the oxygen of different water molecule. So because of this connectivity, water has ability to form matrix. And this is what is shown in this figure. If you look at this figure carefully, these water molecules forms matrices. They can connect with each other. And that gives fluidity to water. water to acquire the shape in which it is put. And that's because of hydrogen bonding. So number one, water molecule has covalent bond, but two water molecules are connected with each other by hydrogen bonds, right? So here, so first in context of sodium chloride, I introduced to you the concept of ionic bond. With hydrogen molecule, I introduced to you sharing of electrons, which is covalent bond. Here, within water molecule, within water molecule, there is covalent bond, polar covalent bond because there's separation of charges. And between two water molecules, they talk to each other. That is through hydrogen bond. Okay. Now, let's take up one of the most important biomolecule that is called as lipids, right? But before we go into lipids, I just want to highlight to you the significance of carbon, right? So carbon, just like hydrogen and water, carbon is also a very important atom. And what makes carbon important is just a second. What makes carbon important is that it can make 4 bonds. What do I mean? I don't want to go into the deep details. Depending upon the electronic configuration, water can form 4 bonds. Right? And in this context, in context of biomolecule, these bonds could be either to hydrogen. It could bond with oxygen. Carbon could also bond with nitrogen. So carbon is a very versatile element or atom that can bond with different elements very, very frequently. And you will see that, and this formation is mainly by covalent bonding, by sharing of electrons. So carbon, just like hydrogen and oxygen, carbon is also very important, right? So now let's go back to the PowerPoint. So one of the biomolecules that we have in our body is lipids, fats. Fats are the major source of energy in this starvation. So there are many types of, I'm just going a little bit off there. There are many kinds of, now people are saying intermittent fasting. So the reason for intermittent fasting is that they want the metabolism of our body to move towards fat. So the fat in the body will be consumed, and the consumption of sugar or carbohydrate will be minimized, because now people think that sugar is problem to diabetes and many other kinds of health problems. So when we are starving, lipids, the deposited lipids which is in our body, it serves as a source of energy. So that was just a brief information. But coming back to the lipids are very small, very, very important molecule, because lipids, they form cell membrane, especially the phospholipids. Phospholipids, yes. Now, why do I say cell membrane? We will see more in second chapter. Membrane, right? Membrane is just like a barrier between inside cell and outside cell. Membrane provides protection to our cells, right? It controls the movement from outside to inside. Okay? And most of these membranes, they are made up of lipids. And these lipids are called as phospholipids. Lipids, such as fats, they are very diverse type. Lipids are of very diverse. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, lipids are very, very diverse. There could be saturated lipids, there could be unsaturated lipids. Lipids could be cholesterol, lipids could be steroids. So it's a huge family of lipids which supports our body. Steroids, there could be hormones. Most of the sex hormones, whether it's testosterone or estrogen or progesterone, they are steroids. Cholesterol, they're very important for the formation of cell membrane. Saturated and unsaturated fats are also important to support the structure of membrane. And lipids helps a lot during starvation. It serves as an alternative source of energy. The second biomolecule is carbohydrate. So just to if you look here, I want to go back to phospholipid. If you look here, a phospholipid, it has carbon atoms, it has oxygen atoms, it has phosphorus atom, it has a nitrogen atom, right? So a combination of, remember I told you that carbon and hydrogen, oxygen are very important, and nitrogen and phosphorus are also important. But a different permutation and combination of these atoms creates different kinds of biomolecules. And these biomolecules have totally different functions with each other, right? Now let's go to the next slide where we talk about carbohydrate, right? What is the building block for carbohydrate? It is glucose. What is, if you look at the structure of glucose, chemical structure of glucose, it has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, just 3 atoms. When they enter into covalent bonding, they found glucose. And glucose, which is carbohydrate, it serves as an immediate source of energy. So let's say somebody is sick, feeling weak, and ends up in hospital. They might, just ask you to drink glucose or take a drip of glucose and salt to start the metabolic process quickly. So glucose is an immediate source of energy. And again, going back to energy, in terms of cells, it is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So one molecule of glucose. So what is glucose? Give me a second. Glucose made up of 3 atoms: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So if you look at, glucose, if you look at the chemical formula of glucose, it is C6H12O6. If you count it, there are 6 atoms of carbon, 12 of hydrogen, and 6 of oxygen. How much total? 6 plus 12, 18, 18 plus 6, 24. So there are 24 atoms in a glucose molecule. And there are 3 types of atoms: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, right? So we saw phospholipid, which was a very complex, big molecule. A glucose is a very simple molecule, right? So, this is the, I don't want to go into the detail, but this is the chemical structure of a glucose molecule, and it is the richest source of immediate energy. One molecule of glucose, when it is metabolized, it can give rise to 36 or 38 ATP. In most of the books, they would refer as 36 ATP, but it depends. That's biochemically, That's not part of this chapter to explain to you why 36 in some condition, why 38. But for general information, one glucose molecule, when it is metabolized, it gives rise to 36 molecules of ATP. So we covered a little, glucose, phospholipid, we covered glucose. Now, let's take a short break of 5 minutes, and then we start studying about proteins. Okay. Anybody who came late, kindly share your name so that I can mark your attendance. So I'll come back at 10:45, 10:46.
Hey guys, I was thinking on that we can make a group chat so we can end up go over the assignments with each other, whatever we need to know. We just check in on a group chat with each other's. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good.
I think
Thank
it's a
you.
good idea.
Yeah, I think so. So I start off my number.
So it's
Cause we gotta pass through.
10:46. I'm going to start with proteins. So let's go back to the white page, a whiteboard. So if you look at the lipids could be saturated fats, could be unsaturated fats, then cholesterol, then could be steroids, then prostaglandins. It's a very big, diverse family of lipids. The next is carbohydrate. Carbohydrates, it's the building block for a carbohydrate is a glucose molecule. Right. Now, if you look for proteins, the building block for a protein is called as amino acids. And just like there are different kinds of lipid molecules, there are 20 different kinds of amino acids. So let's look at the pattern of amino acid. What do I mean by pattern is that what are the similarities and what are the differences? Similarities also generate pattern, a consistent pattern, whereas dissimilarities or differences also give rise to a differential pattern. So an amino acid has a central carbon atom, which is referred as C alpha, and this carbon atom is attached to 4 different groups. 1, 2, 3, 4. The first group symbol is hydrogen. The second group is referred as NH2. The third group is referred as carboxylic group. Right. So this is hydrogen atom. This is referred as amino group. This is referred as carboxylic group. And so this is very consistent among the 20 amino acid. This carboxylic group, amino group, they are consistent across all the 20 amino acid. What amino acids they differ, the 20 amino acid, they differ on the R group, that is referred as side chains. Just like English literature has 26 alphabets, there are 20 amino acids, they differ from each other in side chains, R. Right? And two amino acids, they connect with each other using by a covalent bond called as peptide bond. Two amino acid, they connect with each other covalently by a bond called as peptide bond. So now let's look at what is a peptide bond. So let's go back to the PowerPoint slide. So if you look here, this is amino acid 1. This is amino acid 1, and this is amino acid 2. So when the amino acid, they have to enter into a peptide, formation of peptide bond, the carboxylic group of one amino acid enters into chemical reaction with NH2 group of another amino acid. When they react, they lose one water molecule, and then they form a bond called as peptide bond. Okay. Now we are going into the fourth and the last macromolecule, that is called as nucleic acid. So I would like to go to the whiteboard. The fourth biomolecule is nucleic acid. So let's review how many biomolecules we covered until now. First was lipids, which is very important source for energy during starvation. They are very important component of cell membrane, especially the phospholipid. Carbohydrate, they are the immediate source of energy. Glucose. Proteins have diverse role. Proteins can function as enzyme in metabolic reactions. Protein, all our immune system, antibodies, they are made up of protein, so they play a very important role in immunity. So first, metabolism, second, immunity, third, most of 90% of our hormones are made up of proteins, and hormones are very important. For example, for glucose metabolism, insulin, right? It controls the level of sugar in our body. If the connection between insulin and sugar fails, it gives rise to diabetes. So diabetes is actually hormonal disease. Endocrinology, right? Somebody has a diabetes, he or she has to see an endocrinologist, and they would, regulate the doses of insulin. So immune reaction, hormonal enzymes, and also like muscles, right? Muscles and bone. Protein forms an important component of our body infrastructure and also cellular structure. So proteins are very important. Nucleic acid, DNA is very important for our inheritance, genetic messaging from one generation to the other generation. Also, DNA serves as a template for protein synthesis. And between DNA and protein, there's a very important intermediary called as RNA. So each biomolecule is very unique. They have different functions. They all work together to support our cells, tissue, and organs. So there are two different kinds of nucleic acid. First is DNA, and the second is RNA. Although RNA is derived from DNA, but actually they form a two different world because of their functions. Right? Now, what are the similar patterns we see here? What are the different patterns we see here? So both are macromolecules. So both are made up of repeating subunits, right? Subunits. So for both, the subunits are nucleotides. Right? Both of them are made up of nucleotides. So if both are made up of nucleotides, then what are the differences? So to know the differences, we have to break into smaller pieces. So a nucleotide is composed of sugar, phosphate, and nitrogenous bases. So these are the three components of a nucleotide. So is the world of RNA made up of different things? So it comes out that nucleotides in RNA is also made up of sugar. It also contains phosphate, and it also contains nitrogenous bases. Again, here there is similarity. So what are the difference? Again, you have to go into the details. So it turns out that the sugar in DNA is deoxyribose, whereas the sugar in RNA is ribose. Now we look at the difference later. The phosphate molecule is similar. Now there must be a reason why the phosphate molecule is similar. The reason is that phosphate molecule, it is a negative molecule. It has a negative charge. And I meant a negative molecule means this molecule has negative charge. The phosphate molecule in RNA also is negatively charged. So this provides the net charge on DNA and RNA negative. So both these have similar functions, the phosphate. Now, so number one, the difference was that sugar here is deoxyribose, here it is ribose. So what is the situation with nitrogenous bases? So nitrogenous bases can be categorized into two things. One is called as purine, other is called as pyrimidine. So what is the story with RNA? Here also, it is classified into purine and then pyrimidine. Pyrimidine, right? So again, both are same, then where is the difference? So it turns out that the purines are made up of adenine and guanine whereas pyrimidines are made up of thymine and cytosine. Now let's look at RNA. The pyrimidine here is also adenine and guanine, whereas pyrimidine here is uracil and cytosine. So what are the differences? Differences is number one, difference in the sugar, deoxyribose versus ribose, and then there is difference between in the pyrimidine. In the pyrimidine, there's a difference between RNA and DNA. DNA has thymine in pyrimidine and RNA has uracil. So how these molecules in DNA, they are arranged, right? So DNA is what you see, DNA, which is a messenger for passing hereditary information from parents to next generation, is essentially a chemical molecule, right? So how these chemical molecules are arranged, how they provide structure to DNA. So the structure of DNA is that DNA is a double helical molecule. And our DNA, human DNA, is 2 meters long. Right? And think about it, how 2 meters string is packed inside our cells that we can't even see. So something extraordinary is happening inside our body, that something like 2 meters is packed into a small space. So a DNA is double-stranded molecule. Now, what are these strands made up of? These strands are made up of sugar, deoxyribose, what I meant, and this sugar is connected to a phosphate molecule, and this phosphate molecule is connected to another deoxyribose. Now, they are connected via a chemical bond. This chemical bond is called as phosphodiester bond. So the whole DNA molecule, the whole DNA molecule, the strand is made up of sugar and phosphate, and this bond is called as phosphodiester bond, which is covalent in nature. And this phosphate molecule gives negative charge to the DNA. Now the next question comes, how are these two strands connected? Right? Otherwise they will fall apart. So these strands, they are connected by nitrogenous bases. So A, which is adenine, it forms double bond with T, that's thymine. And again, same, thymine can form double bond with adenine, A. Then guanine forms triple bond with C, and C forms triple bond with G. So guanine forms triple bond with C, and cytosine form. So what you see here, if you note a pattern, if you see a pattern here, adenine, which is a purine, it forms double bond with another pyrimidine, right? That pyrimidine is thymine. Similarly, guanine also is a purine that forms triple bond with cytosine. So DNA the world of DNA, just like English literature, it depends upon 26 alphabets. The world of DNA is made up of 4 alphabets, right? And those 4 alphabets are called as ATGC, which is adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. And RNA is different from DNA, is because it has ribose sugar and it has uracil. So let's go back to the PowerPoint slides and see what is the difference between deoxyribose sugar and ribose sugar. So pay attention. The deoxyribose and ribose, the similarity is both are made up of 5 carbons. Carbon number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 carbons. This is ribose. Ribose is part of RNA. Deoxyribose, it's part of DNA. This also is made up of 5 carbons, but it is called as deoxyribose. Means one oxygen is missing. So where is one oxygen missing in deoxyribose? So let's label them as C1, carbon number 1, carbon number 2, carbon number 3, carbon number 4, 5. So let's focus on carbon number 2. Carbon number 2 in ribose, which is part of RNA. Here you find a chemical molecule called as OH or hydroxyl group here on the second carbon atom. Whereas second carbon atom in DNA, deoxyribose has only hydrogen. So presence of oxygen and an absence of oxygen in deoxyribose, it creates 2 different worlds of nucleic acid. Plus with oxygen, ribose, minus oxygen on second carbon atom, deoxyribose. So that's one difference between the DNA and it's a big difference. And this is the phosphodiester bond, which forms the 2 strands of DNA. Phosphate, sugar, again phosphate, so there's alternate. Here, in this slide, what you see here, purines. Purines are adenine and guanine. They are double ring structure. They are bulky molecule. One ring, second ring. One ring, second ring, bigger structure. In contrast to pyrimidines, which are small, right? So pyrimidines are in DNA, cytosine and thymine. Adenine pairs with thymine with 2 bonds. These bonds are called as hydrogen bonds. So how many bonds did I shared with you? Number 1, ionic bonds that are formed by positive and negative ion by loss or gain of electrons. The second is covalent bond that is formed by sharing of electrons. The third is kind of bond that we see is hydrogen bond that is between 2 different water molecules and between 2 strands of DNA between A and T and G and C. So if you look at overall structure of DNA, so this is a double-stranded helix of DNA. These 2 helix are connected by nitrogenous bases. And you see that these bases are just like ladders. And if you see here, guanine bonds with cytosine with 3 hydrogen bond. Adenine pairs with adenine pairs with thymine by double hydrogen bond. And then what you see here, the metabolism, 1 glucose of molecule, serves as an energy molecule. It is oxidized or metabolized to give rise to 6 carbon dioxide, 6 molecule of hydrogen, 6 molecule of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of water, and 36 molecule of ATP. So it's a very rich source of energy, immediate energy, glucose. Okay. So with this, we finish chapter number 1.